What exactly was the CIA chief doing in Moscow this week? Well, a US military aircraft flew in the Russian capital. The CIA director held talks with Russian intelligence officials, and according to reports, Washington was carrying a warning from Moscow. Don't escalate the Ukraine war any further, especially not with nuclear weapons or an attack on NATO. But the Kremlin says this was a contact between intelligence agencies. Now, US President Donald Trump also called the visit semi-routine, and Russia has not confirmed any discussion about nuclear weapons. So why has this otherwise unusual trip triggered so much speculation online? Here's what we know. US CIA Director John Ratcliffe traveled to Moscow on Tuesday in what US media described as a highly unusual visit. According to the Daily Mail, Ratcliffe was believed to have delivered a warning to Russian officials against a dramatic escalation of the Ukraine war, including the possible use of nuclear weapons. The reported message was blunt: just don't do it. The report suggested that US intelligence assessments were concerned that Russia could respond quickly and dramatically following renewed setbacks on the battlefield. At the same time, reports pointed to concerns about possible Russian action against NATO member states. Reuters reported on Wednesday that Ratcliffe spoke with Russian intelligence officials during his Moscow visit but did not meet President Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin confirmed the intelligence contact. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that Putin had been briefed on the outcome of the US visit but refused to say what exactly had been discussed. He said there had been contacts through the security services but no meeting with Putin. And that matters because this wasn't a normal diplomatic visit. The last known visit by a US CIA director to Moscow was actually in November of 2021, when Ratcliffe's predecessor William Burns held talks with Vladimir Putin just months before Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So what triggered this latest trip? Well, there was another unusual development involving Ukraine. The Kyiv Independent, citing a source familiar with the situation, reported that Washington had asked Kyiv to refrain from striking Moscow and St. Petersburg between August 24 and 26 while Ratcliffe was in Russia. The source claimed that Ukraine agreed to the pause. A US official also confirmed that Ratcliffe was scheduled to meet senior Russian officials, although the agenda was not disclosed. The report said that US officials were concerned that Russian air defenses around Moscow and St. Petersburg might not be strong enough to guarantee protection. Again, there has been no official confirmation from the Kremlin about the details of these discussions. And then there is the flight that first brought attention to the visit. Flight Radar 24 data showed a US Air Force C-17 military transport aircraft flying from Riga in Latvia to Moscow's Vnukovo airport on Tuesday. So was this a nuclear warning? Well, we don't know. The Daily Mail report points to a warning against nuclear escalation. Reuters confirmed that Ratcliffe had intelligence-level contacts in Moscow and that the trip came amid the continuing Ukraine war. But the Kremlin has not disclosed what was discussed. And US President Donald Trump himself appeared to play down the significance of this trip. In a radio interview, he described it as a semi-routine while saying that something useful could potentially come out of it. When asked whether Ratcliffe was in Moscow to discuss a possible Russian move against NATO or Iran sanctions, Trump said none of the above. He also said that the US was working hard to end the Ukraine war. The visit comes as Washington's attempts to negotiate an end to the conflict continue. Trump has pushed for a peace agreement since returning to the White House, but repeated visits to Moscow by his peace envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner have failed to bridge the biggest differences between Russia and Ukraine. And that leaves the bigger question: is Washington simply trying to keep a direct intelligence channel open with Moscow? For now, there is no evidence that Russia has decided to use a nuclear weapon. But the very fact that the CIA director personally traveled to Moscow at a time when the war continues and US-Russia relations remain deeply strained is significant in itself. And perhaps the most important message from Washington is not that Russia is preparing to go nuclear, but that the US appears determined to make sure Moscow knows where it believes the line must not be crossed.